Okay, and we're back. We're sitting here with Matt Williams, who's a big mover and shaker over in the Midnight Chat Attack. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great.
Yeah, I'm glad that we could get you over here.
Dude, I'm glad to be here.
Cool.
I'm honored by this presence here. Part of the big deal tonight.
Yeah, so what happened was we, it's the 10th episode, right? The special 10th anniversary edition. So we had Oz on. I thought we'd bring you on, sort of get an array of different guests that we could get on.
Yeah, look, you could have had any toaster you wanted this
could've.
entire time, and you picked me.
We did.
I am happy about this.
And you told me at one point, we're going to do something a little different tonight. Generally, I come up with a topic, or I find the topic that, relates to whatever our guest is. But you actually had questions for me.
Oh yeah, I have some wonderful questions for you.
So yeah, we're gonna play that game, and if I get in any legal trouble, I can call you, right?
Maybe. Possibly.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know is that sort of like self-incriminating, right?
I mean, you didn't actually say you're going to do
anything
bad.
But you set me up for it.
I can only be here as a vessel. I can't determine what you're thinking.
You lawyer terms on me.
Of course, always.
So let's start this up. I have no idea, by the way, what you have planned. So I'm very interested to know, what your line of questioning is going to be.
Well, the first one is the easiest one.
Oh, okay.
So we always do this every single time I do an interview for my podcast, The Ruthless. I always do one really easy question to just get you started.
Okay.
So this first question is really simple. Everybody has influences, and of course, DT is primarily a movie, related, group.
Sure.
But I wanted to ask you, what musical influences are most memorable to you? Like, which ones do you find yourself going back to? Maybe while you're editing, maybe while you're getting prepared for this show?
Yeah. I do a lot of stuff, right? I'm a painter, and I draw comic books, and I do this thing, and it really comes down to, like, when I was growing up, I used to listen to a lot of Sinatra, which I'm sure people are like, I can see.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And then as I got older, that shifted, and now it's, it went into the sort of the 80s avant-garde era, Brian Ferry, Roxy Music, stuff like that. And then, when I paint, I usually do it to a couple of Miles Davis albums. Tutu, I don't know if you know that one.
Yeah.
And so I try to. It's always kind of like a nice, cool, just like relaxing kind of feel.
So you really go more for like mood music, stuff that's gonna keep you in a groove state.
Yeah, and then especially there's certain notes whenever I'm painting that I'm always hitting the brush at the same exact time. Because that's just how you get it out.
I totally understand that.
Yeah.
I get like that too sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Normally when I'm writing, not necessarily just legal work, but
Sure.
when I'm writing in general, I get something that has just like a nice smooth beat that I can kind of really keep pace with.
Yeah.
And if I want to quickly get through a section, I might want to get something mood related to get in that section.
Yeah.
But that's the easy question.
Oh, okay.
That's the simple one.
None of the hard ones. I gotta check my wrist. I have any notes in there?
No notes. That's the best part about this.
Okay.
You don't have the chance.
There's
to
no wrong answer.
Yeah, there is really no wrong answer. This is a conversation. I don't know if you've seen any of Joe Rogan's podcast.
No, I have actually.
He just brings people on. They sit across from him and they just talk. Similar idea, not the exact same. I am the Ruthless Wonder, not a Ruthless Wonder.
Okay.
So I have to be a little bit more different.
Sure.
But I wanted to get one that should be a knock out of the park for you. But how do you deal with the amount of criticism that you get? Because you said you're a painter as well as a comic artist on top of doing all the other stuff. So I know that that's very common to hear people who you don't necessarily expect to give an opinion on your work.
Yeah.
Like, I'm forgetting all the toaster related stuff. I mean, really, really with your art, like, how do you take in that criticism? How do you deal with that? Going forward, like, what does it do for you?
I wear a lot of hats.
Yeah.
And I genuinely, I don't have time for it. That's really what it comes down to. It's like, look, if you want to say something, go ahead and say something. We talked about this a little bit when I had Chris Cox on, I'm not wasting my time out there commenting on some shithead's post telling him what a shithead he is. If you have the time to do that, then by all means do it. It doesn't affect me. The opinions of other people don't necessarily keep me in a box. In fact, most of the time, they make me strive to be better at what I'm doing. Sometimes they are actually critiquing me, but sometimes they are criticizing you. And when it is just a flat out, person who's just criticizing you for the sake of it, you have to wonder where it's coming from for them. It doesn't really matter, that I have a talking rock. No, it doesn't fucking matter. But for whatever reason, whatever they've been through in their life, it really kind of comes down to lack of experience. They haven't had enough experience in their life to either understand what you're trying to do or feel like they should, talk to you the tone that they're talking to you in. So I really, you can't let it bother you,
Yeah.
I mean, and I think because I've never let it bother me to that degree, or I've talked sensibly about it, people have jumped on that. They've said, oh, well, he's facilitating it, right? Because I don't blow up at it. It's like, no, I can sit down and talk about it reasonably, because there's no reason to be upset over it.
I think a lot of people feel like they have to let in everyone's criticisms.
Sure.
And so because of that, they open themselves up to a lot of negative energy that can keep them from doing what they want to do. It's good to hear that you know what place to put that in and keep moving forward. Man, this is going like gangbusters right now.
Oh,
I'm loving
okay.
this. So, all right, we've talked about your influences. We've talked about how you deal with criticism. I wanted you to be a little bit forward thinking with this next question.
Okay.
Okay.
We should have had me sit there. That'll never happen.
That's fine. No, I wanted to know. All right, so you're here in Austin. You're doing your thing here.
Yeah.
What do you feel like your biggest limitation based on where you are in life right now? Not necessarily physically, location-wise. What do you feel like your biggest limitation is right now for everything that you do? Not necessarily just any one thing.
I think it's a little broad of a question. I wouldn't say there's like a finite answer to it. I mean, are you specifically asking like, I don't sound like a shitty employer, like, where do you see yourself in 10 years?
No. I mean more like, for instance, the thing for me right now is I'm getting ready to move because I want to pursue a different area in law that I've been doing. And the limitation was where I was. Yeah. I couldn't do that where I'm from, Kansas City. Shout out to the 816. But I'm moving because of that. And so sometimes, in life we just have that thing we want to do. Yeah. And it may be a physical block, like a location, but it also may be a mental block. Like you feel like you haven't grown to that next step, or you feel like you haven't embraced a certain part of your creativity for one reason. Yeah,
I think, I'm from Connecticut. I used to work in New York. I went to school in New York. And it was very suffocating. And when I saw the opportunity to be on Double Toasted, I was like, oh, that might be worth looking into. And I literally drove out here with $400 in my bank account and was like, I have to make this work. Right. And I actually hadn't even signed anything with Corey. I hadn't done anything. I was just like, I have to make this work. And I took that risk because I knew that the reward would be worth it if I could make it happen. But I very genuinely believe that anything and everything that happens to you, as much as somebody might want to say that, there's some luck to it, that's true, but you still need to play the lottery to win it. And if you're not willing to do that, if you want to stay at home and shit on somebody for doing something creative versus doing it yourself, then you'll never get anywhere.
Definitely true.
And I think that that's really just the big takeaway from it. Right now, as far as limitations go, it's an ebb and flow. Right now I think, for example, we were on YouTube, but the YouTube Double Toasted audience isn't exactly huge Toast to Toast fans. Right. But on the actual website, they are. We have a huge portion of the actual subscriptions that loved Toast to Toast. However, on YouTube, I mean, you think that we were, Alex Jones up there, and or Tommy Lauren, and it's like, I can't change your mind for you. That's something that people need to do on their own. And if they don't want to change their mind, they don't have to change their mind. That's that's how the world works.
Yeah. Now, the funny thing is, you actually mentioned a name just now that is in the next question.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so, I was setting you up. See, that's how.
See, didn't even know you were doing it. You did it. Now, I know you've seen the crazy interviews that Alex Jones has had recently. Do you ever feel like there's a guest like an Alex Jones that you would not want to interview because of the kinds of things that they said?
Never because of the kinds of things that they said. I have no problem debating whatever the topic is. I do, however, feel if you're going to come on to this show or any show that is not your own show and act like a total jerk off, then you're a fucking jerk off. You know, it's like that. You're wasting everybody's time.
Why be there?
Yeah, and it's like, and especially this show, we're fucking recorded. You know, if I don't like it, you know, it goes right in the trash. I find someone else to interview. So I personally don't have a huge problem with that. I think that if that's what they want to do, then that's what they got to do. But I don't have to use it. You know.
Would you do an Alex Jones interview?
Would I do an Alex Jones if he wasn't a dick sack? Sure. Yeah. I mean, you know, I don't know. Gosh, see, here's the thing too, and this is just me, okay? This is a front, right? This is a facade. This is so much of this is, you know, we're putting on an act, right? That's just kind of what it is, and so does Alex Jones to an extent. Although you can get a lot out of a conversation, the only point in having any conversation is to try to understand a viewpoint that you might not already have. I don't need to understand Alex Jones' viewpoints. And I don't feel like, you know, interviewing him is really going to change that. So it would, if we did it, it would only be for ratings or something like that. And for me, I don't think Alex Jones is worried about getting Will Valle on InfoWars.
Hey, listen, the Toast to Toast audience in InfoWars is like another level right now.
Right?
They are chanting Will Valle every show.
That'd be, oh my God. I would, I think, personally, I think I'd be better on his show than he would be on mine.
Yeah,
because I think
I can definitely see that.
He can go crazy, he can do his own thing, and I'll just be like, all right, man, look, hey, man, send the questions my way, you know. But if it's flipped and he's gonna run around with his shirt off or something like that, you know, it's like, let's just move on.
So there's one part that the reason I actually asked that question is the Rogan
interview. Here he is.
No, Alex Jones. No, the Joe Rogan interview where Alex Jones goes absolutely nuts and starts talking about how gravity is bleeding in from the projections of the universe around us, and Joe Rogan's face is just stuck like for a solid 5 or 6 seconds.
I've seen the Facebook meme.
I think he's lost his mind entirely. Yeah. I think you broke Joe Rogan.
Yeah, I mean, there's a possibility. Yeah. If it happened, I wouldn't turn it down, but I'm not actively seeking it out. I don't have like my assistants out there, you know. Vigorously
the crack
typing
staff behind the camera right now, folks.
Yeah.
Right over there.
There's like 25 people.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. There's no room for me to breathe.
We're not in a second guest room.
There's like 19 different cameras. I don't know what all this stuff is looking at.
But we only use 2 just to piss you off.
They're zoomed in on my face. They're looking at my follicles, checking out my beard. There's a woman brushing my beard earlier. Will Valle's amazing, man.
Yeah.
But no, so this last question is really what we get to. So,
sure.
Obviously, you know, we've talked about your influences. We've talked about, you know, controversial stuff. How do you feel about being, you know, in a almost an entertainment economy that does put a premium on the most outrageous gets the biggest voice? Yeah,
I mean that's the question of the night, right? Question of the fucking year. That's difficult for me because as a creative person, and I'm not trying to say I'm creative because I'm creative, right? You know,
he's creative.
Yeah. As being told that, it is frustrating. It almost feels a little bit like the kid who practices, you know, to work in the Carnegie Hall, right? In a symphony, and you do the violin every night for fucking, you know, 50 years, and then, you know, the person you went to school with, you didn't do anything, and then learned guitar one summer, becomes a rock star. It's frustrating because you feel like, well, I know for a fact that I'm more talented than these people.
Yeah.
And right now, you know, any glamour profession is going to attract anybody. Anybody and everybody wants to be in the limelight, and they have their strengths, right? They can do an interview, or maybe they can draw, or whatever it is. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they should be there. You know, there are lots of people who are talented, but they're not professionally talented. And what it does is it muddies up the water for a lot of other, you know, entertainers or creatives. And you see it now, specifically in Hollywood. We've seen it for years, but just recently they announced, what's his face? I don't remember his name, but he's the head of They announced the head of NBC, and he wants to bring back, you know, ER, and The West Wing, and he wants to bring back all of these shows from the 90s, and it's like, but why? Because you have a lot of these people who are they've failed upwards in their careers in life, and they get to a point where now they have to do something, right? They have to produce results. And if they clearly lied their way through all the tests to get up there,
Right.
they have to say, well, what worked, right? And then that looks smart from an analytical standpoint. But you don't create new IPs like that. You don't create interesting. You don't create any interesting content like that. I mean, personally, I don't. Maybe I am gonna sound like Alex Jones here. Maybe California is going to break off, right? And it's a last ditch effort to make as much money as possible off of known IPs and superhero shit because they know in 20 years there's nothing left. But until then, we're just going to have to endure it. And it is frustrating. But you know what? It's more rewarding when you get to where you get to by sticking through and saying, I'm not going to, go on YouTube and do a fucking unboxing of a PlayStation. Or I'm going to watch a trailer review. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Double Toasted does it better than everybody. But I don't need to add to that pool. There's enough in the pool.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess I've always, especially when you talk about the line over the top, the people that got there without really having the talent are the ones to be worried about the most because they do fall back on convention. And I think you have to have risk to have a great idea.
Yeah.
And the best ideas have that risk element to them.
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
I think, and again, I'm not trying, I'm just going to use Toast to Toast as an example because this is what people are watching, right? If you're on the 10th episode, you've probably seen a couple of the other ones. We got a lot of backlash when we put the animated rock that I used. And we had a lot of backlash when, just like stupid little things. We had a puppet Christopher Walken and a whole bunch of, just kind of nonsense stuff. It was just kind of goofy fun. And, we recently had the 3rd year anniversary party. That's why you're here. That's why you're in town. And I met with a lot of people, and I had one kid in particular. I don't want to say his name, but he came up to me, and he just started jumping on the show. Why did you do this? You should change that, et cetera, et cetera. And I kind of stopped him halfway through his conversation. I just said, how old are you? And he told me, he's like, I'm 21. And I was like, okay, so let me ask you this. Have you ever seen Space Ghost? Have you ever seen Pee-wee's Herman, the
Pee-wee's
Playhouse? Yeah, and he's like, no, I haven't seen any of those. I was like, okay, well, I mean, these are ideas that have been done before. And if you're not used to it, then maybe that's on you, right? But it doesn't mean that they haven't been proven to work. But it's also like you have to try to be somewhat creative in this industry. And, you're not going to appease everybody all the time. When Corey started and he had the co-host, animated ball, people are going to instantly reference that, what was the robot?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think in those instances, it's like you're always kind of borrowing somebody, but you have to try to find a new way to do it. And as long as you can find a way that's not completely ripping somebody off, I think that's fine. There's really only 10, 12 stories in Shakespeare. There's only so many different formats to do a talk show. How many times I see a comment says, "Oh, you should put a desk there." Why? Because you're used to a desk? It doesn't change anything.
Everybody on late night television has a desk.
Yeah, and it's like, well, but I don't need to do that. And you know what? There's a lot like Dick Cavett. Dick Cavett didn't have a desk. And you know what? These people don't know who the fuck Dick Cavett is. So it doesn't mean anything. It's just like, if you don't like it, you don't have to sound off about it. It doesn't change anything. I'm not going to go and buy a fucking desk. I'm not going to go all right, we got to put off the show for another week. I got to go to IKEA and build this thing.
You also need to get a band.
Yeah, right. I mean, yeah, and then at what point does it stop? At what point are you
need a live studio audience.
Yeah, and it's like, are you... And then, if you continue down that path, then you have the same people making the same critiques, and they're saying things like... oh, well, he's just trying to be David Letterman. He's just trying to be Stephen Colbert. Oh, but he has a band, too. Oh, he has a desk, too. It's like, shut up.
Well, and then you lose that sense of individuality that came with the show to begin with. But I'll be honest. One of the things I like most about it is that you've kind of steered into this classy presentation. Of course, there's always a nice drink in the bumpers. Always love that. And that's kind of my thing. Like, I like that. It feels like a show I would watch and... even if I'd never met any of you guys.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference between, people who are fans of, DT and Spill and all
Yeah.
that, and have kind of progressed along the way,
Mm-hmm.
saying, well, we don't like this because it's not like the stuff we've seen before.
Sure.
And newer folks like myself, yes, folks, I'm not actually an original Spill fan. I came along when DT showed up, but that's the kind of the thing. It's like we have a different view on all of you all because I don't have the previous memories to go, well, it's not like this, so I don't like it.
Yeah.
And I think that makes the difference. I think that gives you a chance to be really new and fresh to people who just didn't have that before.
And I think, too, if you're doing that, you're putting yourself in a box.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have to tune into something and expect it to be one way. Now, I will say this, and it's something that Nick, my co-host, we've worked with as, I don't want to say a detriment, but it's been difficult. We are, if ostensibly, we're like high-end whiskey, right? And the bar is a rum and Coke. So if you're used to rum and Coke and you don't want an $18 glass of whiskey or something like that, it's literally difficult to swallow because you're not used to it. It doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's different. And I feel like a lot of it too goes to could be partially the audience, because it's the internet, so it's everybody. But it's I hate just shitting on millennials, but it's just this idea of because I have an opinion, I have to espouse it. But you don't. You can go on and you can do something else.
You're also not guaranteed to be right just because.
Oh yeah, that's the other thing.
The opinion, yeah.
Just having an opinion doesn't mean that you're right. It just means you have an opinion. And you know what? This is gonna sound real, I don't know, fruity here, I guess. But of two people who have an opinion, 9 out of 10 times, maybe 100, maybe 10 out of 10 times, one of those persons is still right. Because in the end of the day, you can actually trace down whatever you're talking about, and you can say this is what they are speaking to or referencing. Saying I have an opinion really is just saying I have an ill-informed thought process on a subject I don't know a lot about. And
I've always said if you have an opinion, what you really have is the story of what you think about a fact.
And that's all it is.
That's really all it is.
I think that's like the definition of it.
Basically.
Yeah, it's just like, that's great that there's no, you don't get a Pokemon badge for having an opinion. It doesn't mean anything. It's just like, well, that's great, man. And if I have one and you don't like it, you don't need to scream bloody murder online about it. It doesn't change anything. It's like, I'm not gonna stop thinking how I'm thinking because it disrupts your thought process.
It reminds me, like some of the backlash that you've gotten reminds me of, I hated this time on my show. So, of course, we had the elections last year.
Sure.
And leading up to that, throughout the entire primary season, I was a Bernie Sanders supporter.
Yeah, so was I.
And the Hillary fans were all over every comment.
Yeah.
And every email, they hated me because I refused to back down on this point of she's not the right choice.
Sure.
Even though she's a better choice than Trump, she's not the right choice. And that became such a thing. And my co-hosts, man, my guests, they were always like, Matt, why do you just keep talking about this? I'm like, because that doesn't bother me that they disagree with me.
Yeah.
Because if we start talking about facts, they're not going to be able to keep up.
Yeah.
If we're talking about opinions, I'm sure Hillary Clinton's a really nice person. I'm sure she's a great now grandma. But I'm not here about who she is as a person, who she is as a leader, governing. And people really can't handle that notion. I think that's one of the things that they have issue with you about is that they feel like just because they feel a certain way, just because they feel offended, you should kowtow to what they want.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, if we're going to have this discussion on facts, these are facts. Yeah. If we're going to have this discussion on opinions, well, you like this, I like that. And we can go our separate ways.
Yeah, I think, a lot of people, we did a joke in the third episode. It was, start your own podcast or something like that. And at the end, I said something like, just remember, the only reason people are watching online is because they want to hear their own opinions back at them.
Of course.
And there's some truth to that. We meant it as a tongue-in-cheek joke, but realistically, that's why you tune into movie reviews. You want to make sure that movie sucked and that it was great, that, the people who were watching it felt the same way you did. They had that visceral experience. But again, it doesn't mean that it's right. There have been plenty of movie reviews that people have put out, and then they've come back 2 months later and like, oh, I don't know what the fuck I was thinking. It was high when I watched it or whatever. But as far as, the election is concerned, right? I mean, I remember writing articles about how I stated Trump was going to win. and the backlash. Just stating that if you looked at the way things that were going to happen and the way that they were unfolding and how unique all of the situations were, people still, they didn't want to believe it. They don't want to believe essentially what's true because it goes against their own credence. And that's really, I mean, that's the fucking plight of humanity right there. You know, you can't get past that. If you can't get past your own ego instead of, values and morals that you've created for yourself or have been taught and haven't thought, past that to something secular, then you're just, you're keeping you, again, it goes back to keeping yourself in a box. You're not progressing as a person. And that's just, I think that when you are under 25, morals are very cut and dry. They're very black and white. You're a good guy or you're a bad guy. It's very difficult to see things in a gray area because you haven't lived enough life yet. And that's all it is. It's like
it's experience. You need that experience.
You need it. You got to be fucking Super Saiyan about it. Be Vegeta. Get killed over and over and over. And then eventually you're like, oh, I got it now. And I think too, on some level, that's why you see online the types of people who are in their 40s are debating. It's usually idiots, right? But anybody who has a degree, right, or is kind of come to terms with how things work, they're not online, posting whatever, some, fucking transgender bullshit. They have other shit to do right now.
Right.
It's usually the people who they don't have a degree in anything, or they feel personally marginalized by whatever the situation is, but they're not seeing it from a broader spectrum.
They Googled vaccines cause autism, and they're an expert now.
Yeah, and that's just it, right? I mean, how many overnight law degrees do we see pop up on Facebook every morning, every time some fucking kid shoots a gun in a mall? Oh, well, it should be this, it should be that. But I very genuinely think that people don't know enough about it to speak about it. And, the internet has opened up that floodgate. I talked with Sammy, and it was just like, it used to be, these were conversations that you had with a rando at a bar or with your crazy uncle at Thanksgiving. And that was kind of all it was. And now it's everywhere because people just aren't used to the fact that other people think differently.
Now your crazy uncle has a podcast with multiple camera setups and has a following, and they buy his InfoWars.
And I think that's a great point, right? Because you have all these people who now the technology, it's like Prometheus, it's been given to everybody, right? Everybody can do it, and everybody maybe, like back to the question you said earlier, it doesn't necessarily mean that they should be doing it, it just means that they are doing it. But I equate it a little bit to like cable TV. I think there was early 80s. People were losing their jobs. They would stay home. They were so enamored with all of the content. And
there was so much of it.
There was so much. I mean, by today's standards, it's nothing. It's literally nothing. But they couldn't handle it. And you had like collectors, people who felt like they had to watch every show. And they, their lives suffered as a result of it. And I think that's just the same thing now. I think it's such a new tool that so many people don't know how not to use it, that they all have to kind of stick their 2 cents in. I have no doubt that 15 or 20 years from now saying I had a podcast in the 20-teens will be the equivalent of saying I had a pair of bell-bottoms in the 1970s.
Well, I've always, looked at that and studied that when you look at the cyclical nature of entertainment.
Sure.
So you've got the advent of the book, of being able to actually have a book, not a scroll. You have the advent of the printing press.
Mm-hmm.
Same idea. You have the newspaper, appearing.
Yeah.
The newspaper was apparently the fall of society at the time.
It's always on its way out.
Then it was the talking pictures.
Sure.
Because the silent pictures had already gone through that.
Mm-hmm.
Then it was radio and television.
Yeah.
And how can we have all these things? We shouldn't do this. There's always that bottleneck of everybody's doing it, and then suddenly, all right, we've got to slow this down a little bit. And then it's fine. Yeah. And I think that, I don't know how long it's going to take for the internet age, but I think we're starting to experience the people who can't really do it.
Yeah.
Getting tossed off to the side.
Sure. A couple years ago, I saw a guy, and he he did some video. He came out and he went into his boss's office and he, quit on the spot. It was Best Buy or some shit. And, I'm going to go be a YouTuber. And he had millions of hits. And, I checked up on him. And now his videos get 1, 2, 3,000 hits. And it's like, there's no pension plan for being a internet personality, right? And there you have this sort of gold collar mentality. For those of you who don't know what that means, gold collar is kind of like service industry type people who make a lot of money, but there's not enough to put any away. So they're able to live a somewhat, fruitful lifestyle for a little bit of time, but realistically, is that really going to be putting food on the table years to come? No, because there's only so many ways you can watch unboxing videos. There's only so many ways that you could, do fucking makeup tutorials. But what does where does that end up? I mean, I don't know. There's a part of me that I wrote an article about this called the YouTube bubble.
Yeah.
And I genuinely think that in the next 5 years we might see it. We might see a lot of these guys going the way of the dinosaur. We'll see the bigger ones stick around, but I think the bigger ones that do stick around are going to be either bought up by companies, or they're going to start their own bigger companies. That's the best thing about Double Toasted, is that we are not beholden to YouTube. If something does pop, we have a structure in place. What the fuck, is Chris Stuckman just going to start from scratch? Or Jeremy Johns, I don't know. Or are they gonna like sign with Collider and start a whole new like sort of paradigm? But right now, it's kind of the gold rush, right? A lot of people want to get in on it, and only so many people are gonna make it. And even the ones who make it doesn't necessarily mean that they're gonna get where they want to get to from it. It's a lot of work. You know?
I think people don't understand how much work it takes to get this stuff done. Like, just even with our primarily audio podcast that we do, there's a lot of times where I'm sitting up for 5 hours afterwards going, okay, this sounds really bad. Let me go back and mess with this. Okay, I don't like this segment. I recorded this on Tuesday. Let's try and get them on the phone and try and get another one in. And that's just, I know you guys have even more to deal with because of the video. And it's like, man, you've got to know that you can handle the workload.
Oh yeah.
More than it. I don't care if you're funny. Obviously, our show is very serious. We tend to stay in politics and news and whatnot. But that stuff is at least a little bit easier because I'm not trying to draw you in off of something else. I'm trying to draw you in on the subject matter.
Sure.
Not necessarily me all the time, even though I'm awesome. You should like me. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram. But
I think that's the toughest part, because you have a lot of people who they're creating content off of content. It's non-tent.
Exactly.
It's non-tent, right? I can't make a video unless a movie comes out. And I think that that's dangerous for growth, because if anything ever happens to whatever that industry is, and I think about video games. Video games is in a weird rut right now. It's like, there's some games coming out, but it's not like it was in like 2007 where everybody had fucking 5 PS3 games a week. And now it's just kind of like, oh yeah, maybe I'll go out and buy like that like classic edition of shit from like 5 years ago. But for the most part, there's not, even the new titles are kind of old titles.
There's a lot of returns.
Yeah.
A lot of just straight up sequels. And you described it perfectly. It is a bubble.
Yeah.
That has to burst, because they always do.
They always do.
The .coms burst. Really, the internet businesses in general.
Oh, sure.
Burst. What's next? It's got to be YouTube, because it's too big.
Yeah, it's too big, and it's the issue with it too is that they know for a fact that they're not competing with Hulu. I think they're trying to. They're starting to have, they have the YouTube Red, and maybe, I'm not some soothsayer. I can't say this way, one way or another. But if you told me tomorrow that all of a sudden, YouTube stock dropped for whatever reason, then I think that would be, if there's a financial collapse, the first thing that's going to go is going to be YouTube, because people are not going to have time to sit around and watch fucking bullshit all day.
Yeah. I was talking to a guy who's a wrestling fan. Like myself, yes, I have a weird personality. But I was talking to a guy who's a wrestling fan. He was talking about how, this adpocalypse on YouTube affected all of his favorite wrestling shows. And I was like, well, yeah, because at some point, you can't just eat off of a video service platform that is built on taking more of the ads than you are ever going to get.
Especially, I would never put my career in the hands of an algorithm that I am not allowed to see.
Yeah.
I think that's nuts. It's like, you are a lawyer, you understand the law. I am a film editor and an artist. I understand the rules about how that works. I don't rely on somebody else saying, oh, don't worry, we'll have this part for you. And I think if you did do that, then you're
in trouble.
You are in trouble. I mean, there's a very good chance that you're like, oh fuck, I didn't know that was going to happen. I mean, I don't quite understand how the algorithms work. I do know that, you can. There are certain things that like, well, engagements are worth this and clicks are worth that, but it's still so finite and so precise that unless you are fucking, analytics guy, it's really difficult to really quantify and say, oh, this is more of a science than it is an art.
Yeah. The other thing that scares me with YouTube is that they automate their copyright strikes.
Oh, sure.
And they are not actual DMCA claims.
Yeah. And we've been hit. I haven't, but DT has.
Yeah, and most people don't know this, and so this is probably some new information for a lot of people. When YouTube does a DMCA claim on your content, basic copyright strike, that is done through an internal service at YouTube / Google. Yeah, that has nothing to do with the actual filing of a claim against you, which is a process that takes so much longer.
And I wonder too, as a lawyer, maybe you could speak to it, because I don't think that's ethical. I think it's almost borderline. It's like arresting somebody without a charge.
It's kind of in a weird gray area because of the situation. You have a service that is saying you can put your content on our service. Sure. And if a copyright owner were to file a claim, they could file it against YouTube just as much as they can the content creator.
Sure, because they're liable.
Right. Yeah. So YouTube is essentially saying we will police ourselves so that you don't come after us as well.
But the problem is they're not actually policing themselves.
Exactly. They don't have any human beings really running that until you step up to the next level. Yeah. It's similar situation to motion pictures. The MPAA is not a government body. Sure. They police themselves so that the government doesn't do it for them. Yeah. Same idea with YouTube. YouTube is doing it so that they don't get hit with these strikes themselves. Yeah. And that makes a very dangerous environment. It does. I have always been afraid of it.
I mean, it's a brave new world, right? Because everything is available digitally. And we see it, right? You can take the Avengers and you can replace everybody's head with Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, and and it'll look pretty decent. And these are videos that float around, but realistically, I mean, how much money is it really making? Because everybody can do it. Again, you get into that area of just being sort of you're over inundated by it, and if that's the case. It's really just more non-tent out there. I don't think as a purveyor of original content, I've ever had to worry about it. There's no copyright out there for my intro, for my logo, for my whiskey bottle, any of that shit, because I built it myself.
I think Usher might like your I Love Thoughts.
Oh yeah, okay.
I think he might be interested. However, do not have sex with Usher. Whatever you do, stay away from Usher.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, right. But outside of that, I personally don't have to worry about it. But a lot of these guys, and that could be part of the downfall. Eventually, you might just see such a tightening of